Hello.
Good evening,
Hello.
sir.
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Uh, Good evening, everybody. Today's chief guest, Advocate Vivek Joshi, sir, and dear participants, welcome to this webinar. This is the first webinar organized by Law Cure. Law Cure is a very innovative, bold venture initiated by a few of our students. Of course, it has a long way to go, but this being the first venture, I take this, I feel it as my privilege to welcome you all here. So understand what, object and main aims of this venture. There will be a short presentation of a 30-second video, and thereafter we will start. Yeah, over to the video. Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
Uh, you have just seen the video, and see, to sum up, we will find that the legal education has changed a lot over the years, and the legal education 30 years, 50 years was not the same as today. And over the last few decades, at least one to 1.5 decades, there had been a mushroom growth of law schools with very good infrastructure and everything. But many of the law schools, what we have seen is they are lagging behind in actual delivery of things. That may be due to many factors because of non-availability of efficient and effective faculties and non-upgradation of curriculum which will answer the need of the hour, and also to some extent the level of students and their backgrounds. And many students in the law schools are not having the opportunity to present themselves in moot courts, in debates, and all other co-curricular and extracurricular activities. And I had occasion to listen complaints from the students that we don't get what we expect from the law schools, and especially the amount of fees we pay to the law school, the delivery of things are not matching our expectations. This is a naked fact. It's a bitter fact. It applies to many law schools in India. And this venture, this Law Cure is a venture which will provide, it's a platform which will provide all these opportunities to the law students who are really interested without the support of institutions. That means without the barriers of any particular law school. So the video was very informative, and it spoke about everything. So I do not want to elaborate on this. Just I say that this as a venture, it is open for all the law students across India who have a real interest in self growth and growth in the profession. So I request anyone, all of you, to propagate this mission and this message, and ask your colleagues to join this venture by sending an email with a covering letter, by sending their CV by email with a covering letter, what they expect or what change they foresee in the field of legal education and the legal profession, and also with the expression of their interest by what way they want to, uh, you know, they can contribute towards that change. Now, today I congratulate the organizers of this venture for holding and arranging this webinar. That is a very informative and very relevant topic. And we are fortunate to have Advocate Vivek Joshi, who himself is a senior advocate in the trial side. You know, the real advocacy lies in the trial courts. The advocate is built in the trial court. I had an opportunity to listen to none other than Ramjat Malani speaking in Balaji Law College years back in Pune. He said, with referring to criminal law administration, he said that the irony of criminal justice administration today in India is the fact that the people who have not even conducted a trial in a 323 case or a 324 case sit in apex court and pass ratios relating to criminal jurisprudence. So he was referring to the need and importance of trial lawyering. Unfortunately, the new generation law schools are going away from trial advocacy. The law schools in India, maybe because of the high fees being charged by them, they are engaged in an exercise of creating corporate lawyers whom can be equated with a glorified corporate legal clerks. And I always felt that the law schools must serve the need of the trial advocacy in India. Then only we can say that as an institution, law school has been successful. So, since the topic is very vibrant, I do not want to talk on anything on the topic except a few things that in India, the law schools are not trained in the practice of law, except a certain national law schools or some other high-profile law schools who train them on art like mediation, arbitration, and other aspects of corporate lawyering. The trial advocacy is not being trained in the law schools. Neither the lawyers are not trained in the profession. Cross-examination is an art which Indian lawyers develop by themselves from their practice. They are not trained anywhere. And see, when we had hosted certain American lawyers in the law school in the National Law University a few years back, we asked them, even judges were there, we asked them how much time you take to cross-examine a witness in US courts. The reply was that it will take almost half an hour to complete the cross-examination of one witness. And in some complicated case, it may extend up to 40-45 minutes. But in India, there had been a practice of elaborate cross-examination. See, whether you have to cross-examine elaborately or not, or it has to be brief, it depends on your brief as well as the way you have been trained and you have been learned. Rather, you have been accumulated, I must say, because there is no proper training in India. And to the students who are into this webinar, I would like to suggest that you have to refer a few books with respect to art of cross-examination. One of them is Art of Cross-Examination by Francis L. Wellman. It's a Macmillan publication. This book is considered to be very authoritative text on cross-examination. It was first published in 1903, but still it is a very celebrated uh, book on cross-examination. Yeah, and another one is cross-examine, and this book it also has uh, references or brief of most important cross-examinations in certain celebrated cases. Another one is Cross-Examination Science and Techniques by Larry Posner, and an Indian book that is on cross-examination principles and precedents by T. Ramnath Iyer. And there are many other books available. I was suggesting you these books. I will definitely share the books and authors' name through the WhatsApp of the group. Now, before inviting the chief guest to speak on this, I also would like to say that cross-examination, the purpose of cross-examination is basically to testify the evidence given by the witness in the chief examination. Moreover, it lays certain points which the lawyer will successfully connect through at that time of arguments. I will just share you one example where Abraham Lincoln, the former president of America, he himself was a renowned lawyer. He was examining a principal eyewitness in a murder case years back. So the murder took place in the night, and there was only one principal eyewitness. During cross-examination, Lincoln asked how you could identify the accused in the court. Have you seen him? Then the witness said, I have seen him committing the act. Then he asked how you could see when the act was committed, allegedly committed, in the night. Then the witness said, I saw it clearly in the moonlight. Then Abraham Lincoln stopped the cross examination. He said, no further cross. When it came to argument, he came with the calendar to the court and showed that on that particular day of alleged incident, it was a new moon day. There was absolutely no sunlight, it was moonlight. So this is an eloquent example of the craftsmanship of a lawyer in cross-examination. You would like to, you would have lot many such incidents and examples from a person who is actually in the field, like Advocate Vivek Joshi. So, sir, as far as Mr. Joshi is concerned, I have seen him only once in Amity Law School, but he has created such an impression on me that I was overwhelmed to know that he is the chief guest. Then I thought I myself should be present and introduce him to the audience and to say that this webinar is open. And some of my former students and acquaintance had been his times also. So I know how as a trial or how effective he is, and I request him to address the audience. Sir, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Anil, for this lovely introduction. And I also would like to thank the young people from Law Cure that they have invited me for this interaction with the young and budding lawyers. Not taking much time, I will start with my presentation for the cross examination. So let us see. Sir, can you confirm, are you able to see the presentation? Hello?
Sir, we aren't able to see any presentation.
You are able to see or not?
No, sir. No, sir.
Just a minute.
No, sir, we can't hear you.
Is it now
Sir,
you are
now
able
it's
to see?
visible.
Yes. So if you see, the title of my presentation is Cross Examination, a Trial Winner. As explained by Professor Anil, the importance of cross examination, I would also like to reiterate that the cross examination is the time in the trial when you are in position to win the case for your client. You can convince the judge by leading an effective cross examination why your client should win. So let's go to the next slide. Before we discuss about what cross examination is and what are the patterns which has to be used, let us discuss about the kind of trials. In law industry, there are primarily two kind of trials. One of the trial is civil trial and the other form of trial is a criminal trial. Now in civil trial, you try all kind of suits. You talk about matrimonial matters, you talk about summary suits and labor laws, all these kind of trials which does not leads to a conviction are civil trials. Now, the other kind of trials is a criminal trial. Now, in case of criminal trial, most of the courts are trying the offenses which are under Indian Penal Code. Now, this is a criminal trial because if you are convicted, if you are found guilty, then you will be sentenced to jail. In case of civil trial, the court may ask you to refund the money. The court may ask you to redeliver the possession of property which you have been illegally occupying. So civil wrong and criminal wrong are two different things. Now let us go to the next slide in which I am talking about the stages of the civil trial. It is very important to know when you are going to get into leading of the effective cross examination. So let us talk about the stages of civil trial. In a civil trial, it starts from a petition or a plaint in which you go to the court with your complaint that this person has done such and such civil wrong against me, therefore I am entitled for such and such benefit. That is what is called as a petition. Thereafter, once your petition is given in the court of law, ask case. Now, in that case, the court is going to ask the petitioner to file his examination in chief. And in case of civil examination, in case of civil trial, the examination in chief, that is the evidence of that person, is filed on oath and affirmation, and it is on affidavit. The original documents based on which your suit is there or your civil case is resting has to be filed along with the list of witnesses whom you want them to depose in your favor. After the finishing of this examination in chief, the court is going to ask the defense lawyer to cross-examine the petitioner. Now, this is the stage in case of civil trial when a person gets entitled to cross-examine. Now, if you are going to do the cross-examination in a civil trial, then you need to know the civil law and the facts of your case. Now, once you have done the cross-examination and all the other witnesses which were petitioner witnesses, you will file an evidence close pursuit. Now, pursuit is only a small application, or I should say an information which you tell the court that I don't want to lead any further evidence, my evidence to be treated as closed. Once petitioner evidence is treated as closed, then court will ask the respondent or the defendant to file his or her examination in chief, that too on affidavit, along with the list of documents and along with the list of other witnesses. The same thing will happen once the witness enters the witness box in a civil trial. The defendant witness, the petitioner will be asked to cross-examine that, or the advocate of the petitioner will be asked to cross-examine that particular witness. Thereafter, the process is the same. You have evidence close pursuit and you have final arguments and final order, right? So the court will give an order on all the issues which it has framed after going through your petition as well as the written statement. Now I am going to the next slide. There are two kinds of criminal cases. One is a private case in which you go with a written complaint or an oral complaint to the magistrate court directly. You don't go to the police in this case. So this is a civil trial, a criminal trial with a private case. Now, after going through your complaint, the court is going to put you into the witness box and they will ask you some questions. If the case is maintainable, the court is going to issue the summons to the accused. Now, in this case, there is nobody called as defendant, or there is no terminology called respondent. It is the complainant, and the respondent means the person who is accused. So we don't write respondent in criminal trials, we write accused person. So once the accused person receives the summons, he comes to the court and he files a bail application, because technically he is accused. So he will be granted bail, and then his plea is recorded. Plea recorded means the judge is going to ask the accused person whether you plead guilty of the offences which you are which are mentioned in the complaint. So if he says yes, I plead guilty, the judge will decide the case there itself and put you to sentence, because you are admitting that you have committed something which is criminally wrong. Now, after you record a plea that you are not guilty, the court is going to ask the complainant to lead evidence before charge. Now, there is a stage in which charges are framed against the accused person. Now, in case of a criminal trial, that is a private case, the evidence before charge is led, in which the complainant will be put into the witness box. He will be examined. That is the examination in chief. Now, the basic difference in between a criminal trial and a civil trial is that in case of a civil trial, you are allowed to file your examination in chief in writing in the form of an affidavit. Whereas in this case, in criminal case, there is nothing called examination in chief by affidavit. You will be put into the witness box. Your advocate, if you are filing a private case, will ask you open-ended questions and you will respond. The judge is going to record. That is what is your evidence. That is what you have seen, why you have filed this case, how the offense was committed. So these are the questions which he is going to ask. Now, after he has been examined in chief, the defense examination, the defense will lead its cross-examination in this case, in case of a private case. After that, the judge will see whether he has sufficient evidence to frame the charges. If there is no sufficient evidence to frame charges, the judge is going to discharge the accused, no charges maintainable against him, and he is acquitted. If there are, if there is an evidence and a prima facie case exists, then the judge is going to frame the charges and he will say that I, judge so and so, frame such and such charges against you under such and such section of IPC or any other sections or any other statute of criminal law. Then again he will be asked to lead evidence, cross-examination, and once the cross-examination is over, the party, that is the criminal complainant, if he does not wishes to file any further examination, he does not wishes to lead any further witnesses, he is going to file his evidence clause pursues, and thereafter there is a statement under section 313 of CRPC in case of criminal trials, because it is mandatory as per law to ask the accused why this person has been filing a case against you, and if anything has come against him in the evidence, then the accused need to explain. An opportunity needs to be given to the accused to explain why such and such thing has come into against him. Thereafter, if the defense wants to lead a
So you're not audible. Please unmute yourself.
now am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So these are the stages. After once the defense witnesses are closed, then final arguments are there and the judgment or an order. Whether you are found guilty, then you will be sentenced, or you will be acquitted from all the charges. Thereafter, there is another kind of criminal case which is filed by filing a police complaint or an FIR. In this case, you do not go to the court of law directly, you go to the police machinery and you file the police complaint over there. If police finds the case in such a way that it is mandatory for an arrest of the accused person, they will arrest, or if the accused comes to know that there is a FIR against him, he will proceed to session court for an anticipatory bail. And once this stage is over, the next stage comes for investigation to be done by the police, in which police goes and collects the evidence against the accused. They can file a charge sheet against the accused. They can come to the court and say there are no charges which we could find against the accused. They can come to the court and say there is no evidence against the accused. So in that case, the court can either discharge them or ask the complainant to file a protest petition. That's a different thing. I'll take it somewhere next time. Now, after filing of the charge sheet in the court, there is a procedure of final bail. If you have taken an anticipatory bail, then you just need to go and present your surety papers along with a bail application. The court is going to grant. Suppose you were not granted anticipatory bail, as it happens in some of the SC/ST atrocities matters, then in that case, you have to approach the magistrate court with a bail application. If you are granted the bail, then you will be coming out of the jail, otherwise you continue to be in the jail. After this, the magistrate is going to record your plea, whether you are guilty or you are not guilty. Now, what happens in an FIR and a charge sheet case? Some people go under 482 CRPC directly to Bombay High Court or other high courts for quashing of that matter. So either you can go for a quashing of the matter, or you can file a discharge application that police did not find any charges against me, any evidence against me, so I should be discharged. After this process is over, if you are not discharged or High Court refuses to quash the complaint or the FIR against you, the magistrate or the session judge, as per law, will proceed to frame charges against you, where he will tell you that I charge you for such and such criminal offense. Thereafter, the prosecution will come and lead the evidence, and the defense attorney is going to lead the cross-examination. In the same way, a statement under section 313, defense witness, defense cross, final arguments, and the final order. So if you see, there are two stages in which you get to have an opportunity of cross-examination. One of them is during the prosecution witness, and the second is during the defense witness, right? So now we go to the next slide. Now, before we get into this topic of cross-examination, let us understand how many types of examinations are there. So in a trial, there are two kinds of examination. One is the direct, which I called is an examination in chief. If you see the top portion of the slide, there is an arrow in which I ask you a question. That is, the lawyer is going to ask a question to the witness, and witness is going to tell me the fact. What happened? For example, I asked to a witness, why have you filed this case? He will say, because he came and slapped me on such and such date, that's why I have filed a case against him. And the judge is going to record this. So this is the way of leading a direct examination. Now, in case of a direct examination or examination in chief, please remember it is the witness who sings the song. Witness isme gana gata hai. By this, I mean to say that it is the witness who tells you the facts of the case, what he has seen, how it happened, who did it, right? So these are the things. But in case of cross-examination, now when you are leading the direct examination, you have to bring the facts out in the form of examination in chief before the court. For example, if there is an offense which has happened, now who has done this offense? What was the offense? Where it was done, how it was done, when it was done, and why it was done. So these are the questions which you can ask, and once you ask this question, the witness is going to give you a complete answer. Who did it? Sir, Mr. XY that has done it. What happened? So the victim was traveling on the road. The accused came from the backside and with a knife in his hand, and I saw him stabbing with the knife. Where it happened, sir? It happened in the market near near to the Bombay High Court. How it happened, sir? If he knows how it happened, he can tell. But if he does not know, the witness can always say, I don't know how it happened, but it happened. When it happened, so he will give you the date. And why did it happen? If he knows why it happened, suppose there was a previous rivalry among them, then he may tell. Otherwise, he may say, I don't know. Because not that every witness who knows everything about the case, but there are some witnesses who are the chance witnesses. By way of time, they are just at that particular place. So they may not know that the accused and the victim were having rivalry. That's why he stabbed him. But the law does not permit you to ask any leading question in the direct examination. Now, this opportunity of asking who, what, where, how, when, why, you will not get in a civil trial because you are filing a written examination in chief over there. Only in criminal case, you are going to get an opportunity to ask these kind of questions to the witness in direct examination. But you will not be allowed to ask a leading question in direct examination. Now let us talk about the cross-examination. Now in the case of cross-examination, it is the opposite of direct examination. I tell you a fact and you tell me yes or no, admitted, denied, I don't know, right? So you put the words in the witness's mouth. You control the witness. Now that is why I say that in case of examination in chief or direct examination, it is the witness who sings the song. Whereas in cross-examination, it is the advocate who is going to sing the song. He gets an opportunity to cross-examine the witness of the other side on all the facts which he has told. Now let us get into the other slide. why do you need to do a cross examination? Now the fundamental answer to this question is you need to tell the court why your client must win the civil case or why your client must be acquitted in this case. So this is an opportunity when you can turn the tables and you can convince the judge, the court, that this is the reason why my client needs to be acquitted in this case. All the other things, fundamental right, everything is there. Now, this is the most important part of the cross examination. What is your defense? How will you let the court know that this is my defense? Suppose an alibi is your defense, the court will not come to know. You have to put the question to the witness that on such and such date, my client so and so was not on the offense scene. So that means you are building up an alibi. You were not present over there. Then you have to attack the credibility of the witnesses. Now what happens is, in most of the cases, the police officers bring the panchnama of the place where the offense has taken. So what they do, they have regular punches in their police station and they call those people. Technically, as per law, they should call any 2 or 3 people of that particular locality who should be having good knowledge and they should be good members of the society. But it does not happen in practical. So you have to attack on the credibility of this witness, that the witness is tutored, or a witness who himself or herself was sentenced in a fraud case has come to give a witness in a case which is again a fraud case, and you want to bring out the bias of the witness before the court of law. So this is how you attack the credibility of the witness. How you do it, we will tackle it in the next slide. Thereafter, you try to shift the burden of proof. Now you see, in any case, there are 2 things. One is onus to prove and the second is burden to prove. The onus to prove is always and always on that person who wants the court to believe that such and such thing has happened. In criminal case, it is with prosecution. In civil case, it is with the petitioner. But the burden of proof during the trial keeps on changing. So if you have certain documents which says that when the victim was attacked, your client was not in Mumbai. You have some hotel bills, you have some other things to prove that he was in Nasik. So you simply put up a question to the witness on such and such date, my client was in Nasik. So he may say, no, he was in Mumbai. Now what you have done, you produce the original documents in the court and you say, see, my client was in Nasik and these are the bills. So by doing this act, what you have done is you have shifted the burden of proof back upon the prosecution to prove that he was not in Nasik, because you have already proved that he was in Nasik. So this is what you do in cross-examination. You try to shift the burden of proof. After that, in case of criminal trial, now what police does it, they go and record the statement of the witnesses. What have you seen? Aapne kya dekha? Kisne dekha? Kab hua? All these kind of questions they record and they file along with the charge sheet. Now what happens is, because the trials, especially the criminal trial, they go on and on for a very long time. Maybe after 4 years or 5 years, the criminal case goes for a trial in which the witnesses are examined. Most of the witnesses have forgotten what they have actually written at that point of time when they gave their statement to the police. So what they do is, when they enter into the witness box during the examination in chief, they tend to forget a lot of things which they have mentioned in the statement to the police. So those things which they have forgotten to mention in their examination in chief are called as omissions, right? And the second thing is contradiction. Now, during the time when he has given the police statement, he has said something, but in his examination in chief, he has said something different. Now, in case of a criminal trial, omission and contradictions are something which will help you to win the case, which will help you to ensure that your client does not goes for a jail and he is acquitted. So these are very important things. But what happens is, when you see that there is something which has been omitted and there is something which is coming as contradiction, something else has been told, then what happens is, you have to point it out then and there to the court. The court will actually mark that particular aspect with a red pen on the examination in chief which the court has recorded, and they will give it some kind of identification number. And suppose if a person has said in his police statement that he saw the victim being stabbed by this particular person. But in his examination in chief, he does not take the name. So this is an omission. You will have to ask a question which is related to the omission, so that it comes in the knowledge of the court that this particular thing has been omitted. Whereas if a person says in his police statement that he saw this person stabbing this person, and in the witness box he is saying he has not seen, so this is a contradiction. So you have to prove, you have to tell the court that these are the cases, but for that you have to put questions to the witness during the cross examination. So you see what is the importance of cross examination. Now, this is a million rupee question, करोड़ों रुपए का सवाल है, in which everybody, it goes in the mind of everybody whether it is difficult or it is tough or what. Most of the people who are effective cross examiners, they also find it difficult. Sometimes they find it tough. But even I have seen the people getting into the cross examination, and the lawyer will say, "Oh, why am I here? Why am I here? What should I ask? Okay, yes, this is my name. Why have you filed this case?" This is, so what kind of cross examination is this? This is not a cross examination. You are losing a battle with the witness, and you are losing the case. Now, if you approach to conduct a cross examination properly, you will not have any difficulty in leading a cross examination. You will have to organize the cross examination in a right way. See, for every cross examination, there is a objective of the cross examination. Now, in just prior to me, Professor Anil was telling that some of the foreigner advocates who had come, and they said we do the examination for hardly 45 minutes. But in India, it goes for 2 days, 3 days, multiple cross examination. It's not required. So you need to know the objective of the cross examination. Why am I cross examining this person if that particular witness is not hurting my case? Suppose he comes and say, yes, murder hua tha, but I don't know who has done it. So there is no need to cross-examine this person that on this date you were there, how far was the distance, you see it with the naked eye, you were wearing specs. There is no need. There is nothing in his testimony against your client. Don't ask any question. Just simply sit down. Thereafter, for winning any kind of case, whether it is civil case or a case which is criminal, you need to do a very good case analysis. When I say that you have to do a good case analysis, I mean to say that you need to have good facts and bad facts about your case very clearly. See, good facts of your case you can always present to the witness during the cross examination. But when you are talking about the bad facts and you are trying to extract something which is favorable from the witness for your client, then you need to have that witness in control. Otherwise, the cross is going to go haywire, and you will have a large amount of issue with that, including the loss of the case. So, but how do you analyze the case? Now, what you do is, in case of a civil trial, you need to go through each and every line. You need to understand each and every word which is mentioned in the petition. What kind of defense you have taken in the written statement. After that, you need to go through the issues, you need to go through the list of documents, you need to go through each and every line of examination in chief on affidavit, and then you need to understand what is the law, where it goes, which side it goes, whether the law is in my favor, and then you organize that this is the point on which I will have to cross-examine this particular witness. So that is how you do the case analysis in case of a civil case. Sorry. But in case of a criminal case, you have to start doing the case analysis from the time of remand. When the FIR is registered, your accused for whom you are appearing as a defense attorney is brought to the court of law. You go for a remand. The police is going to ask for a remand. Remand means that he should be in police custody because investigation is going on. We want to thoroughly investigate. So the court has powers to grant remand up to 14 days. So what is the defense which you have taken during the remand? What is the defense which you have taken while you are asking for bail application? You need to go through the FIR. You need to go through the statements recorded along with the FIR. You also need to go through the charge sheet. You also need to go through the statements which are along with the charge sheet and analysis of the evidence which has been collected by the police. in the form of Panchnama, in the form of list of documents, that all will help you in doing the case analysis. And then you need to know the criminal law. Now in criminal law, it is very clear, whatever is mentioned in the statute, if you take that person out of that particular place, you will win the case. For example, I say one Negotiable Instrument Act 138 check bouncing case, which you will find most of the cases are being filed in the court of law. So in this particular case, there are 5 things which are there. The check should have been bounced. The check should have been issued by from the bank, right? And then after bouncing of the check, you need to send the notice. And after the notice, the person should have not given you the money. And the last fact is that there should be a legally enforceable liability or debt. So the law itself is telling what you have to disprove. So you do the analysis of your case and disprove. Out of these 5 things, if you prove even one thing, for example, is not send the notice, because law expects you to send the notice, a demand notice. If you have not sent it, you are out. Right? So this is how you do the case analysis of good facts and bad facts. Now you need to have a clearly defined purpose of your cross-examination. This is what I am going to achieve out of this cross-examination. Don't go without a preparation. Don't go with a defined objective in which you have to face a punishment from the witness. Now, the most important part of the cross-examination is that you need to have witness in your control. After this, you need to use the details. So if you are confronting the witness, you need to go through the documents which are in the court case file. Right? So use those details. Over such and such place you have said this, now you are saying this. Is it correct? So this is how, if you approach the witness for the cross-examination, I mean these 5 points, if you cover, you will not find it difficult. And I would also say that in the next slide, I am going to discuss the 10 commandments of the cross-examination, which comes from a very learned professor called Professor Irving Young. You can Google his name. You can go to the YouTube. You will find that these 10 commandments, which he has defined in a long back, are valid now also, and you should not violate these 10 commandments. The moment you violate these 10 commandments, you are going to be punished then and there itself. Right? So the first commandment is of the cross-examination is you have to be brief. When you are leading a cross-examination, you need to, as I pointed out in my earlier slides, you need to have the details, you need to have a good case analysis. If you have these things, you will be very brief in your cross-examination. Now, if a witness has said 20 things, and out of that 20 things, 10 things are not against you, are not hurting your case, do not cross-examine that particular person on those things, because what happens is, if you approach a witness with a very lengthy cross-examination, he becomes attentive and his nervousness goes away. So that's why it is always a commando raid in which you are in and out. Don't over cross-examine a witness. There is no necessity. And when you are out of your education from various colleges where you are, and once you become an advocate, you will see this kind of mistakes is being committed by almost most of the attorneys, in which you will see that they will over cross-examine. It is not required. You have to be brief. That's it. See, the second commandment which is there, that you have to ask very short questions, and these are plain words. The problem with the legal system worldwide is that, in case a law student and an advocate, senior advocate, they are taught a very particular dialect of English which is called as legalese, which nobody understands other than the advocates of the respective countries. Now, when I say you use a plain words, I will give you an example. Now, there is a case of insurance in which there is a motorcycle which has met with an accident. Now, a person who is examining or cross-examination, it is a motorcycle. Now, you need to understand what he is going to ask. See, for a simple thing is that, what was the speed at which you were driving? I was driving at such and such speed. When did you apply the brake? I applied the brake at this particular point of time. Were you wearing the helmet? Yes, I was wearing the helmet. But these are not the things which they ask. They will ask a particular question. Now he is basically a dudwala who is going to distribute the milk at various places in the societies, and his motorcycle has met with an accident. They will ask, what did you do with respect to operation and control of your motor vehicle? Now this person has no idea that this motorcycle can also be called as motor vehicle. So he will give you an answer which will destroy your case. So you have to use very short questions, and you have to use the plain words. Don't use legalese over there. Don't ask a witness whether you understand the Greek or Roman word res ipsa loquitur or whatever legal maxim which they will never come to know, and you will not achieve anything. But if you ask a short question, the witness will be in your control. Now, this third point, ask only leading questions, is the most effective part of the cross examination which you can do. You should never violate this commandment. Rather, you should ask all the questions which are leading in nature. Now, what are leading questions? Leading questions are the questions in which you put the words in the witness's mouth. It brings control. So if you don't ask leading question, for example, if you ask a question like, please explain what you have done. You have killed your case, you have killed your client, in which you have asked the question, how, please explain. Now, once you have said, please explain how the murder has happened, you have all the rights to give a 10-page lecture to the judge, and judge has to listen to your everything. Right? So you should not be asking anything but a leading question. Every question in cross-examination is going to be a leading question. Otherwise, you will be punished then and there itself. I will come to what leading questions are, how to frame leading questions. That also will take in the next slide. Now let us see. There is another fundamental of cross-examination. Now you have to go and take instructions from your client in a detailed manner. You have to go through the case analysis in depth, and you will come to know what are the answers. Do not ask a question for which you don't know the answer. Do not ask that question, because if you do not know the answer, you will try to investigate, and the human mind is very inquisitive. After asking 4-5 questions, you start asking the question, oh, isme to ye nikal raha hai, so let me ask something more. So the moment you ask these kind of questions for which you don't know the answer, you will be punished then and there itself. I will give you an example. Now, there was a case of theft which happened in Bhiwandi. It's a town near to Thane in Maharashtra. Now, a person was accused of stealing, of theft in a house, right? So my colleague and me had discussed this particular case in a very detailed way. So she started leading the cross examination. She was going very well. Now, what did she ask to that person who was was standing on the witness box? She asked the question, how do you know the accused? Because initially 4-5 answers came in the favor of the accused. So she wanted to ask, how do you know the accused? Actually, the question which was planned was that you do not know the accused. So instead of asking this question, she asked, how do you know the accused? Actually, it was in Marathi. Tumi accused la kasa olakta hai, means how do you know the accused? You know what is the answer came? He is the biggest thief of our area. He is the biggest thief of our area. He has so many FIRs against him. Something which was not on record was brought on record during the cross-examination by a defense attorney. And finally, because of this particular question, he went to a jail for 2 years. Otherwise, the sections were, as per the sections, he was entitled for 5 years of jail. So there was no necessity to ask for this question. When you don't know how he knows him, why do you want to ask? Right? So the next part of this particular commandments is you have to listen to the witnesses' answers. Now, what happens is the advocate is always under a pressure of framing the questions. So most of the times he will not listen to the witness. You can see the trial lawyer, they are what they do is they will be having a pad and they will be having a notebook and they will be having some papers. I don't know what they continue to read in that or what they want to write into that, but they don't listen to the witness's answer. Now there is a question, there is a cross examination in which it starts like this, that what happened when you entered inside, right? So this is the question. Now the witness answers, when I went inside the house, I saw the accused sitting on the table along with the victim. Now he should not be asking this question again, but unfortunately the advocate asked this question, when did you see the accused for the first time? Now what is this? Not listening to the answers which the witness has given. He has already told in response to your open-ended question in the chief that I saw the accused person sitting on table along with the victim. So that means when he entered into the room, that is the time when he saw the first time the witness, first time the accused person, where was he sitting? So you don't listen to the witness's answer and you tend to ask the questions which makes a difficult stage for a cross examiner. Apart from this, see, if you do not listen to the witness examination, witness answer, sometimes the witness gives the answer in your favor and you again ask the question, the same question to the witness. Now what happens is witness becomes attentive and he changes the answer, which goes against you. So you should be very attentive at that point of time. You should be listening to the witness answers. Now, this is another part of another good thing about the cross examinations. You see, the cross examination is always a verbal duel in between the witness and the advocate. Now over here what happens is, the advocates, they get frustrated and they start quarreling with the witness. You answer my question, answer in yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. Did you do it? So anything which is of this kind of flavor, in which you ask a witness like this, you become aggressive in the court, you lose the control. And moreover, the judge who is there, he is always in, he has a sympathy towards the witness, and nobody wants to be bullied, especially by a lawyer. So if you quarrel with the witness, you lose control. The judge may not be to your side, and sometimes what happens is the judge comes to the rescue of the witness, which is a very difficult situation to control. So never quarrel with the witness. After this, do not allow the witness to repeat. Now witness has said something in the cross examination. For example, there is a cross examination which is examination in chief, in which witness has said during the crossing of the road, the light which was there was green, right? So he has already told that the light for the vehicle, the light was green. Now in the cross examination, the witness should not be allowed to repeat this, but by asking certain questions, we allow the witness to repeat. Now, what is the question which we ask? What color was the light when you were crossing the road? It was red. Now, your case is that the light was green. So, you should put a witness, you should put a question that when the accused was crossing the road, the light was green. He may answer no. It's okay. But if you ask him what color was the light when the witness was, when the accused was crossing the road, it was red. Were you wearing your glasses at that point of time? Yes. Tell us what color was the light? It was red. You are under oath. Yes. What color was the light? It was red. So now the light which could have been green in the judge's mind, it will be always in red color, but till the time he retires from his position. So do not ask or allow the witness which he has already said in the examination in chief. Your job is to disprove his case, not to admit his case. By asking a question like this, you are admitting his case. You are affirming that particular sentence. Now, the witnesses have a tendency to try to explain his answers, because psychologically a witness is going through a problem that he is being considered as a liar. So when you cross-examine, you should never allow a witness to explain his answers, because the moment you allow the witness to explain his answers, he is going to throw enormous information which will not be good for your case. It is going to destroy your case. So do not permit the witness to explain his answers. We have different techniques, and you will also have to develop your own techniques to prevent the witness from explaining explaining his answers. Right? Now let us see what is the next. Don't ask one question too many. Now this is a problem which most of the people do. They ask one question too many, and before you realize that you have done a mistake, it's already gone. The witness knows what he has to answer. Now let us say how one question too many comes into picture. Now there is a case in which a witness was traveling on the road, right? He has stated in his direct examination that the case was that the accused has bitten the nose of the victim, right? So how do you cross-examine? You cross-examine a witness based on the facts which he has displayed, or you derive some logic. So now here the advocate is asking question. You are walking on the road, isn't it? Yes. When you are walking on the road, what were you doing? I was looking at the birds. The birds were on trees. Yes. And the birds were on trees. You were looking towards the bird, and something happened at your back. He said yes. There is no need to further cross-examine. You just should sit down at that particular place. But what did he do? Because he knew that there are a large number of things which has come in our favor. Now this is one question too many. See, you said that you were walking on road and you were looking towards the birds were on trees, something happened at your back. Then please explain to the court, when you were looking towards the tree and the birds, how did you see the accused person biting the nose of this victim? Now the answer came, I saw him spitting out of his mouth. So what have you done by asking one question too many? You have actually destroyed your case. So you should never ask a question which is in the form of one question. Actually, you are asking too many questions into that. Now you should save the ultimate point for closing. See, the attorneys, advocates have a tendency to ask questions and they try to solve the case. They try to actually solve the case at during the cross examination itself. They want the witness to admit that he is speaking lie, he has made a false statement, which is not going to happen. So you have to have something for the argument also. So what you do in cross examination, you actually build up the case for arguments. You try to twist the facts in the way you want. So you save something for the closing of your case. Now let us talk about leading questions. Now how do you make leading questions? Now leading questions, you have to tell a fact, right? So you tell a fact and you add a tagline to that fact. Now your name is Rinku, this is a fact. If you add isn't it after this, then what happens? It becomes a question. Your name, your nickname is Rinku, isn't it? He will answer yes or no. So what are you doing? You are trying to control him by asking a leading question. The next question, you work for XYZ company, don't you? Answer will be yes or no. On 1st of July 2020, you went to the office, didn't you? Answer will be yes or no. So what you do is, you try to tell a fact along with a tagline, right? So you ask first 3-4 questions with a tagline and then gradually drop this tagline, because the witness has come into your control and he is going to answer. So you just put the fact directly to the witness. For example, with your voice itself, you can make a question to a leading question. You got your salary for this month? So answer will be yes or no, right? So what are you doing when you are asking a leading question? See the pressure which is put upon the witness. You are asking him to certify, disagree with your case. Now the advantage of leading question is that the witness is always and always in your control. Okay, so you should always be asking leading questions in the cross examination. Now the best part, you need to develop this habit. It is not going to come in a day or two. Unless and until you have 10 or I should say 20 cases you have handled for cross examination, you will not develop this habit. But now you are in college, you should start developing this habit of training yourself for asking leading questions. So if somebody is having a dog in his house, you start talking to your dog. You are a dog, yes. You have 4 legs, yes. You have 2 eyes, yes. Your name is so and so, yes. So what happens is, you get into a habit of asking leading questions, which are the only way to win the cross examination. But do not try to ask leading questions into your relationship with your friends, with your wife, with your husband, with your sister, with your mother. You will spoil the relationship. It's not required. So leading questions you need to develop. For example, the other way of learning how to make a leading question. When you are walking on a road, start talking to yourself. I was walking on the road. After 10 meters of the road, a red color car crossed me. All right. So this is what you are doing. You are getting into an habit of asking leading questions and only leading questions. Do not ask the questions which start from different things which I said, who, when, what, how, where, please explain. No, these are totally debarred kind of things during the leading cross examination. Now let us do a case analysis. As I told you, in a civil case, your case analysis will be from this part. You need to go through the petition or plaint, list of documents along with that, written statement. You need to go through the issues, you need to see the examination in chief, or you need to go through the previous statements, you need to analyze the good and bad facts. Now, the most important part of your cross examination is that you have to develop your own story. What are you doing by developing your own story? You are developing a defense. Define your objectives of cross examination, and then you organize your cross and lead. Whereas in case of a criminal case, you start your preparation from the time of remand report, FIR, go through the charge sheet, witness statement, charges, you analyze good facts and bad facts in your case. Develop your own story. For example, what would have happened if this is the fact which has happened? What else could have happened? So that is something from which you define your defense, right? You need to, in both the cases, in civil or in criminal cases, you need to know the law, because law is going to tell you how to defend yourself, how to come out of the check review which has been made by the police, which has been made by the civil petitioner or what. Then you organize and lead. So this is what you have to do as far as the case analysis is concerned. Now let us talk about an example of a civil case. Now the case fact is that there is a joint flat in the name of two brothers, share certificate in common name. The payment has been made from the bank account of one brother. The brother who did not make the payment filed a partition suit. Okay. But what are the additional facts of this case? The additional facts of this case are that the brother who asked for partition has bought his flat at the same point of time, and he invested in furniture, interior of his flat, and claims that he has made a payment of this. From this common fund, the flat was purchased. Right? So this is the case. Now, the defense of the brother who made the payment is that I paid the entire money, and out of my love and affection, I added the name of my brother. I have all the investment on record. The brother invested the entire money in his own flat. Now you have done what you have done. You have gone through the petition filed by the brother, the partition suit. You have gone through the written statement. You have seen the account. You have seen the account statement. You have gone through the sale deed. You have gone through the sale agreement. You have gone through the money trail, how it has moved, right? So you have the entire things, and now you know that this is a case of Transfer of Property Act, so section 45 will be applicable. Now what it says, if there is somebody who claims that there is a common fund, then partition has to happen in the manner the parties have contributed in that common fund. For example, if a flat is purchased of 1 lakh, elder brother has made 60,000, the younger brother has made 40,000 payment, the partition suit will be decreed for 60:40, right? So what you do, you cannot take the entire you cannot take the entire benefit, but yes, now it is his claim that it is from the common fund. So how did I destroy this case? Now when I led the cross examination of the petitioner, I asked him a simple question. You have not made any payment toward the purchase of flat. One, I added a tagline, isn't it? He said, it is false. So I made it. But in his entire petition, in his entire list of documents, in his entire examination in chief, he has not disclosed how he has made. So what I am trying to do is, I am trying to shift the burden of proof back upon him by asking this question that you have not made any payments toward the purchase of the flat. Thereafter, what was my second question? There was no common fund. Is that correct? So he said, no, there was a common fund. What he has said in his explained in his examination in chief that he has deposited this much of money in the common fund, right? So then what was my next question? You have not produced any documentary proof that you paid this much of money directly to the builder. He said, yes, I have not produced because nothing was on record. Then what was my fourth question? It was, you have not produced any documentary proof to prove that you transferred such and such amount towards the common fund. There was nothing on record. So he has said yes. Then I asked him, is that correct to say that you purchased your own flat during the same time? Yes, because he knew that we have filed along with our written statement the documents which he has of his own flat. You have invested the funds in your own flat. Yes, you are not eligible to claim any partition. He said, no, I am eligible. But so this is the way I conduct the cross examination in a civil case. What I have done, I have made a defense that it was me who paid the entire money. He said, I have made the payment and I have invested this much of money in he was not able to prove. So when section 45 will be applicable, he will not be entitled to get even 1% of that because he has not proved. His case was of common fund. Money used from the common fund, but what he has not proved. So what you have to do is when you are doing the case analysis, go through these facts. This is how you build up the case, the cross case, when you have to put up the cross examination questions to the witness. Now let us talk about a criminal case. Now this is a case which is very commonly being filed nowadays in between husband and wife. It is a case of section 498A of IPC. The wife's case was that husband used to harass her, he used to beat her, wife filed a divorce case and husband did not contest. Husband did not contest the divorce case and the wife got divorced. Now the defense of the husband was, which he disclosed to me, that he never committed any violence. His wife was having an affair with such and such person and wanted to get married. The husband was having the photographs with that particular person, and now there was a marriage certificate, certified copy of the marriage certificate available with us. Now what was the cross which I led when the wife, the ex-wife of that person entered into a witness box? See, I asked him, the accused never committed any kind of violence. Is that correct? He said, no, he committed. Okay. The accused states that you wanted to marry XYZ person. He said, no, it is false. The accused has these photos of yours. Can you please confirm? Along with the application, I gave it to the court and a copy to the public prosecutor. The photos were put to her. She accepted because it was her own photos. She said yes. And then I asked, the man standing with you is Mr. XYZ. She said yes. Have you been divorced? Yes. Did you get married again? Yes. What is the name of your husband? Now, when I asked this question, she was trying to, in a very feeble voice, she was trying to give the name. Then again I asked this question, what is the name of your husband? So she ultimately accepted that it was XYZ. And then I asked her whether this is the same person who is standing with you in these photographs. She said yes. Her case is destroyed. Her case is totally destroyed now. So this is how you try to lead the cross examinations in a criminal case. These are just examples. You will have to develop your own theory, which will be based on the facts and circumstances of your case and the evidences which are available with you. Now let us talk about the most important part of the witness control. Now you see, as I told you, leading questions are the best tools to control the witness. You have to control the witness by asking the leading questions. If you ask, please explain, the witness will never be in your control. He will never be in your control. He will always give you the answers which he wants to the best of his knowledge. Suppose in some cases where I am the person who is from the petitioner side, I always train my witnesses before putting them into the witness box. I tell them, ask for the questions in which the advocate is going to ask you, please explain. Look for the question when the advocate is going to ask you why you say so. The moment you hear why you say so, how it happened, you have to give a lecture to the judge which he has to record, and everything should be in your favor, because what has happened is you have given him everything on platter. Now the case is not in your control. Whereas if a witness, if an advocate is going to come and ask only leading question, the witness will always be in your control. वो तड़प जाएगा. He will get frustrated, and a time will come when he will start giving everything in your favor because he wants to finish it off and get out of the witness box. Now, as I told you previously, you should be not asking the questions, please explain. Who, the questions which are starting from who, when, why, what, where. Your job is to disprove the case by asking these questions. You will be approving the case of the complainant or the petitioner. Never ask a question which starts from please explain who, when, why, what, where. No need. Directly put the facts, add a tagline. After 4 or 5 questions, drop the tagline, directly keep asking the facts. Now what happens still? There are some witnesses who tend to answer more than what you ask for. So you need to control those witnesses. That we will also deal with. Now you have to ask a short question, a one fact question. Now what happens is, suppose you are going to ask a witness a question on 1st of July 2020, you went to the store and you bought oranges. Now the witness, what you have done is actually you have asked 2 questions in 1 question. So witness may answer no. What will judge record? It is not true to say that on 1st of July 2020, I went to the store and bought oranges. See, it might have happened that he has given the answer no to the first question, yes to the second question. That is whether he, or he wants to say no, I did not bought oranges, I bought apples. So what you have to do is you have to ask the question on 1st of July 2020, you went to Trust Supermarket. Yes, at Trust Supermarket, you bought oranges. So if he is going to say I did not buy oranges, then because what he bought is not going to affect your case. In this case, I give you a liberty to ask you the question, what did he buy? So you may say, what did you buy? You may say, I bought apples. So you should be controlling the witness by asking a simple one fact question. Don't ask multiple question in one question, right? Suppose if a witness, like for example, if a witness standing in the witness box and you say it was hot on that day, isn't it? So witness says, what happened on that day is that the birds were on the sky and I was looking at it. So what you have to do is you have to simply repeat the question. It was hot that day, isn't it? He again goes, it was hot on that day, isn't it? Now sometimes he again does the same thing. So what you have to do is you will have to apologize, Mr. So-and-so. I am so sorry, I was unable to make you explain. My question is, it was hot, isn't it? Right? So you are, what you are doing, you are bringing him back to the same question and you are asking the same question. So it talks about your firmness. Thereafter, sometimes what happens is the witness still does not answer your question. So you can tell him that I will discuss with you about the weather, but now I want to talk to you about I will talk to you about the birds later, but I want to talk to you about the weather. Was it hot that day? Right? Now, sometimes what you have to do is he still does not answer. So what you have to do is you'll have to ask and flip the question. By flipping that question is that you reverse the question in that way. You may say, was it hot on that day? No, the birds were there. Was it hot on that day? Yes. Now what happens is still comes to the birds, trees. The birds were on trees. The tree was standing over there, and it was hot that day. Correct. So what you do is you try to bring the witness under your control in this case. Now, sometimes the witness, when you have asked a question and you try to give, the witness tries to just answer and he goes on and on. So what you have to do is you have to simply hold your hand like this, like the way traffic police ask you to stop. Now, what happens is it is psychological thing which happens in the mind of a witness that he's asking me to stop, let me stop. So once you show your hand, the witness is bound to get stopped. He will stop, right? And the last most important part is you have to ask the only leading questions in this particular case. Now, I want to tell you one more thing. Sometimes when you deal with the expert witnesses like the police, you will not get the answer the way you want because they are trained in that way. So what you have to do is if you ask him, for example, that before going for a investigation, you have to write such and such thing in your station diary. He'll say, uh, before going to this particular place, I went to this place, I that. Whether he is trying to give you a large number of answers, but he's not coming to the point whether it is true or false. So you allow him to speak and then say, are you done? Now, can you answer whether it is important for you to fill up the general diary before you go to this particular place, right? So he will answer your question at that point of time. Now I end my presentation over here about the cross examination, and now I am open for questions. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Hello.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for your very informative presentation. And since time is also we have some time constraint, but still there are some questions which I will
Yes.
put it across to you. Sir, one question is with respect to the fact that see, it is some candidate has asked about the credibility of evidence of a witness whose statement is recorded by the magistrate and how it can be disturbed.
Credibility of a witness.
Whose statement is recorded by magistrate, 164 statement, and how
Okay.
it can be reached.
See, if you have to destroy the credibility of the witness, you need to know more about the witness. You just can't destroy the credibility by saying that you are a witness who is corrupt in nature and you are biased in nature. For example, if a person has given a witness in favor of his friend, right? So you have to ask a question that the victim is your friend, isn't it? He may give you an answer yes, he may give you an answer no. But if you know that he is your friend, then you can further ask on such and such date you had gone to have a party along with this person. Is it true? So he will be into fix. Now what you have to do is when you are attacking the credibility of the witness, you have to expose the bias of the witness, or sometimes you what you have to do is you have to try to move on to a fact that he has perceived it wrongly. I mean, see, different people under pressure uh, come to understand the things in a different way. Like somebody has said something to him, so I may see that he has threatened me. Other person may see that there was a friendly discussion. So what you have to do is at that point of time, you will have to bring it out in such a way that the judge gets convinced that this person is biased. Now, for example, attacking the credibility of the witness in case of Panchnama, sometimes what we do is we know that if this is a punch who is coming regularly, then we try to get certified copies of the disclosures which a punch made in other case from the court of law. So when we ask him that you are a regular punch of this particular police station, he says no. Have you given the Panchnama prior to this? No, I have not done. Is it correct that your name is mentioned in this particular thing? So once you put up a certified copy of that deposition before the court will believe that this person has been coming regularly. Apart from this, you need to cross-examine a person to break his credibility from the point previous previous statements in writing which he has done. So if you do that, you will be in position to destroy the credibility of the witness. But most of the time, it depends upon the facts of your case.
Sir, another question is, in case of police brutality, how much
Yes.
how much value or credibility is given to the statement given by the person who had been in police custody and subjected to the brutality?
See, if a accused is in the police custody, whatever statement which he has given, I mean, police has beaten him and extracted the statement that he has committed the murder. These questions have got this statement has got no meaning in the eyes of law. He can always come to the court and say that this statement was given to me under pressure. But what happens is when you admit your offense, the police actually calls a magistrate or to the police station and they record your statement in front of magistrate. So if you have done that, your client has done that, that is having force of law. But all the things which happens without the admission of the witness of the accused has got no meaning. He can always come and say, I mean, I was not the person who has done this. They have done it. They have threatened me. They were beating me. So this is what we do it in the court of law. It has got no meaning. But what happens is sometimes when the accused is in the custody of the police and he discloses that this is the place where he was hiding the murder weapon and police takes him to that particular place and prepares the Panchnama, then under section 27 of Indian Evidence Act, it is admitted and proved to the extent that on his statement, this particular thing was found at that place.
And another was with respect to the client preparation. That thing you have already covered in your session. And one more thing, one more question is,
Yeah, as far as 1 minute, sir, as far as this client statements, there say your client is going to give you a large number of documents to file it on record of the court case. So when you go through his case and you go through those documents, file only those documents which are required for his case. Don't file n number of documents, because for an advocate to draft a petition or filing of the documents, first thing is that he must know what he should not write
yes,
in the petition. You know what you have to write, but you don't know what you are not supposed to write. Once you write in the form of affidavit or in the form of oath, then what happens is that it becomes your admitted position. You can't go away from that particular place. So, and when you are see, there is a stage of proving of the documents. Now, for example, in a civil case, if you want to prove the documents, you have to put the witness in the witness box. You have to show him the document. What is that you have to file? You have filed. He will say, I have filed the sale agreement. Where is your signature? On the last page, my signatures are there. Is this your signature? Yes. The contents, what do you have to say about the contents of this document? He will say, the contents are true to the best of my knowledge. So this document stand proved. So you have to show that document and you have to prove that document in the court of law. And the manufacturer of that document, the person who has created the document, can only prove. Right?
so one more and last question,
Yes, sir.
because that is, suppose a witness denies or refuses to answer, how to
Yes.
tackle such a situation?
Suppose a witness denies. See, you have to see if a witness denies. If the denial is in your favor, you admit. There is no necessity to do any kind of cross examination. But if the denial is not in your favor, then you have to cross examine. And if a witness refuses to give the answer to that some question, at that point of time, the judge has the power to direct the witness to answer that particular question. And if he further declines, then it is it is presumed that if the witness would have answered that question, it would have gone against him. So that comes in your favor.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, it is said that a good start, once something is started good,
Yes, sir.
50% is achieved. So so we are blessed with your presentation and your
Thank you very much.
session this time. And it
Sir.
being the first session, we are much obliged to you on behalf of the Law Cure and all its members and on behalf of all the participants. I thank you very much for sparing your time with us, sir. And it was very
Thank you very much.
informative and interesting. We hope to have more association with you in future.
Sure. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah,
Good night.
I also congratulate and thank the organizers, a team of young committed lawyers, budding lawyers who made all these things possible. Each one of you deserve congratulations, and I congratulate them and I also thank them. And I also thank every participant for their patient hearing and their cooperation. We will cooperate and we will meet again in the same platform, other platforms in future. Thank you very much. Thank you once again, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello.